This is Geek Gab with your hosts, Brian Niemeier and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. That's right, Geek Gab, 30 minutes of the best geek talk around every week. Someday that week, although typically we've been broadcasting on Saturday afternoons. Welcome to everyone who may or may not be listening. And as is my tradition at this point in the show, I'm going to stop for a brief moment and allow my co-host to get a word in edgewise while I take a sip of water. How are you this week, Brian?
Extremely busy. I've been working on edits to my second novel, titled Soul Dancer, being edited by the lovely and talented L. Jaji Lamplighter Wright. And I couldn't be more ecstatic about it. It's work that doesn't feel like work. How are you?
Actually, likewise, I am very busy. I have started writing a memoir of the last year of my involvement in the Hugo controversy with Sad Puppies, and a memoir of my involvement in Gamergate, because one led to the other. And I've got a contract from a publisher which boils down to deliver something publishable and I will publish it. And so they said I should be shooting for between 50 and 60,000 words, which is, for those of you listening, that's about half the size of your typical novel, not your typical fantasy novel, but your typical normal book.
Right.
And that so I am, after a week and a bit of writing, I'm at 10,000 words. So we are moving right along. My goal is about 6 weeks to have the first draft manuscript done. And then at that point to have some beta readers take a look at it, see what they think, and then hire an editor to have them go over the manuscript. I don't know. I may have those backwards, though. I may do an editor before a beta reader. I may not. I'll have to think about that.
Generally, I'd advise beta reader first and then editor last, but that's just how I operate. I found it useful.
Okay, go ahead and say why.
Well, because my process, and keep in mind, like you said, this is fiction, which is going to work totally differently than nonfiction. In fact, a lot of the steps for writing a fiction and nonfiction book are the exact reverse of each other, including from the beginnings, because fiction is usually submitted on an entire draft basis, and nonfiction is usually submitted based on just a proposal. But anyhow, the reason, well, let me walk you through my process. So first I outline. I am an architect. I'm an outliner. I can't do just seat of your pants writing, or I will wander off into the thicket and get lost. So I do my outline. So I know the basic structure and what plot points I need to hit, what needs to happen before I start writing. Then I'll do a first draft, which is invariably going to suck. So I will let it cool on the windowsill for a couple weeks, then come back and do a second draft. I will then take that second draft and hand it to my beta readers and just ask them two things. Did you ever feel bored? Were you ever confused? I will then take the notes they give me on, here's what I felt. This felt tedious. This was confusing. And I'll do a third draft based on that. The third draft goes to the editor. I then take the editor's notes and make the final draft. And the reason is, Brandon Sanderson had a great metaphor for this. It's like, okay, if you make the analogy that a writer is like a professional racing driver, okay? Yes, a writer knows a manuscript or knows a book, much like a racing driver hopefully at least knows how a car works, right? But he's not a professional mechanic necessarily. So your beta readers are like other fellow test drivers who could, drive your car and know, okay, yeah, there's a rattle here, the brakes feel a bit soft, but, or just, something is wrong, it's not handling right. An editor is like a professional mechanic who's like, this is exactly what's wrong, and here's what you need to fix it. So it's like a higher tier. It's a much finer and more precise level of vetting than a beta reader can give you.
Well, that makes sense. My goal is to write it the best I can, proofread it as much as I can, pass it out to some people to take a look at, and then get an editor to have them go over it. And then once I've had them go over it and done any changes that I need to do based on their feedback, pass it off to my editor at the publisher and have them do, a final read through and stuff. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. Here's the thing. It's odd. When something takes over your life for a year and you've been working so hard at it, you're in, I don't know, I'm trying to describe this in a way that it's not offensive to people, but you're taken out of your life. It's like being drafted, not drafted into the military necessarily, but drafted into some organization. You're taken out of your life. You spend a year doing stuff, and then you come back to regular life, and you start to forget what it was like to serve in that capacity for that year, whatever that capacity was. And so I'm starting to forget what it was like to work as hard as I did for for free speech, for freedom of thought, for freedom, creative freedom in the video games industry, for simple, basic ethics in journalism, for all of that. I'm starting to forget what the stress, the tension, how difficult it was, how on the edge of survival everything was. And I want to get it down. This is why I first started thinking about doing this. I wanted to get it down in a way that I could go back in 10 years' time and read it and remember, oh yeah, that's what it was like to be there. Because the only way to do that is to write it up, to actually put your memories and your sensations and your impressions down on paper so you can come back and read it later. You could, your memory is not good enough and things fade.
Right.
So that's what I first started doing this for. And then I thought, you know what, I bet other people would be interested in the same thing. So I went and I talked to the publisher and they said, yes, absolutely. We'd be, excited to publish it and we'll give us a manuscript. So I did exactly what you suggested with nonfiction. I, made a proposal, gave them a sample, and said, "This is what I want to do." And they said, "Good. Here's some ideas and some directions to go in. Give us a call back when you've got your manuscript finished." So,
outstanding, yeah. And the publisher sounds like they've got their act together because, your book meets all the criteria for an ideal nonfiction book. It's topical. It's written by someone who's there on the ground, in the trenches, watching and participating in an earth-shattering event unfolding. It's exciting. Now, are you allowed yet to mention who the publisher is?
I have not been given an indication that I can do that.
Say no more. Okay, I will drop that. I do not want to do anything to endanger this opportunity. So,
yeah. But I will say this. I think my book will be a third volume in the unholy trilogy of Gamergate. The first volume, of course, is Vox Day's SJWs Always Lie. And that is a high-level tactical thinking, philosophical work about not just Gamergate, but all the other things going on around it, what came before, what came after, and how to fight in that kind of war. It's sort of a general's view of a conflict.
Yeah, didn't he say he'd intended it originally as a polemic, but it ended up as almost a field guide?
Right.
Yeah.
And the second volume of the Unholy Trilogy would be Milo Yiannopoulos' upcoming history of Gamergate. And I don't know when he's going to release that, but that's a historian's view of Gamergate. It's from the point of view of somebody who wants to know all the events and their chronology and how they played out in a big picture sense.
Sure.
So that'll give you a different look at Gamergate. And my point of view is a ground level, in the trenches point of view, because here's the thing. I'm not high up and never have been as far as being a prominent person in this process. Milo interviewed like 200 people for his book, and I wasn't one of them. And I'm not saying that's bad, because I'm just not prominent enough either in video games itself or in Gamergate itself to be one of the people you would interview if you were writing an overarching history of the events of the last year and a half, 2 years, however long he goes back with it. That's just not something you would do, is come to me for that kind of knowledge, because I don't have that kind of position to where I would be able to provide you with that information.
You're not invited to the quarterly meetings in the secret mansion in Colorado.
Exactly. I'm not a member of the secret Illuminati cabal that is taking over the world. So yeah, but I have, I'm very definitely can give the point of view of all the normal people involved, all the people who are completely unknown, who are just fans of video games and fans of comics, fans of movie, fans of TV. And so I have a pretty typical experience with being involved in Gamergate from that point of view. Not one of the big people everybody listens to, not one of the, not one of the people who have the big platform, but so yeah, I can speak to what it's like to, have 30 followers and trying to beg and ask people who are far more prominent than I am if they will tweet out a post I made, trying to just get involved and make my voice heard. It's very difficult. It's very frustrating sometimes. So I can definitely speak to that. And that's going to be a different point of view than either the general's planning to where you're learning the lessons of this war to apply them to the next war, or the historian's analysis where you're looking at the broad scope of things. Mine is very much, that's why it's a memoir, is it's very much one personal tale of one person, why they got involved and what they did as part of their involvement, and where to and how that took me through my strange particular individual journey through the situation. So that's what the book is going to be about. So you could take those 3 books and you would have an excellent overview of all of Gamergate if you took them as sort of again, that's why I called them the Unholy Trilogy, is right. Milo, Vox Day, and Daddy Warpig, a 3-volume set of the complete history of Gamergate.
Well, sir, congratulations. You have rocketed your manuscript far beyond the slush pile where reside the other memoirs of lesser quality written by any number of federal prisoners.
But you had, so I'm excited, folks. We're looking at finishing the manuscript in 4 to 5 weeks, and however long editing and beta reading takes after that, I'm not sure. And then turn the manuscript over, probably a couple of weeks at least, turn the manuscript over to the publisher. And so maybe, possibly, could be looking at getting published in 7 to 8 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. I'm not making any promises. That is not a hard and fast deadline, but that is kind of a rough guesstimate of where I am right now.
Speaking of advice that isn't necessarily hard and fast, I might be able to trim some time off of that process there, because I know you'd mentioned having the manuscript edited before you submitted it.
Yes.
Well, if you're doing a nonfiction book and you've got, an official statement of interest from a publisher, you can skip that step. Usually, they will usually do the copy editing and the line and content editing for you. You will definitely want to ask about that. But yeah, I mean, hiring a freelance editor is usually something reserved for self-published authors.
How much? How much did your freelance editor cost?
Oh boy, significantly less than the normal going rate. What you probably want to know is how much does a freelance editor cost?
Sure.
You're looking at anywhere. I mean, depending on what kind of connections you have and who it is, anywhere from like $500 to $2,000. Also
Wow.
based on the length. So yes, this will probably also save you some money, because I mean, here's the thing, man. I haven't read your contract, but you're going to be giving up some rights to this book to the publisher. I mean, that's how it works. Well, one of the things they're supposed to do in exchange for that is to give you editing services. I mean, that's why they employ editors. So I would talk to them and see what kind of editing you can expect, and if they would like you to hire your own, see if you could perhaps get reimbursed for that or something. Just some insider pro tips here.
All right.
Things to consider.
What? I think you had something else you wanted to talk about, though, before we moved into the main topic.
Yeah, a couple things. As always, I already have one book out, so I beat you to it by a little bit. It's a sci-fi fantasy book called Ethereal. It's magical space pirates in space hell. Hat tip to my editor and my buddy JJ and my fellow author Josh Young for coming up with that. So that's available now at my website. You can find a link to it below in the notes. Also, I have an apology for our listeners. I originally thought we were going to be discussing Skin Game by Jim Butcher, but Dornall had to bow out, and he's the one who really wanted to discuss that, so we don't want to deprive him of the joy of discussing that book. So we're going to be talking about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. this time, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we're going to be talking about that. But then, was Larry's Fisk what you were actually referring to that you wanted me to talk about here?
Well, you just mentioned wanting to talk about it. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yes, that was it.
Okay. Tell you what.
While we're on the subject of independent publishing.
Yeah, so let me get that link for you. I'm going to put it in our chat, and you can perhaps add it to the notes later. There it is. Yeah, friend of the show, Larry Correa, a former guest, saw a just an inane article on the HuffPo from one of their staff writers, who incidentally doesn't get paid for what she does. And she titled it, "Dear Self-Published Author, Do Not," in caps, "write 4 books a year." And yeah, that's the most retarded advice anyone could give an author. That is the best way to not make money at this. I actually have direct hard evidence refuting her position, which is basically that to avoid the tsunami of crap, what a self-published author wants to do is just refine and craft and just lovingly construct every novel like a Japanese swordsmith polishing the blade with ever finer grades of polishing stone until it's perfect. And, take a decade if you need to. But, I mean, if you look at the hard and fast numbers, it is authors who publish at least 2. And by the way, one interesting thing I found out at authorearnings.com, which I'm currently looking up a link to, is that traditionally published authors actually, on average, publish more books than self-published authors. At least the ones who do it for a living. And if you want to get into like the 6-7 figure pay bracket yearly, then yeah, you're going to have to put the pedal to the metal and be prolific.
So,
yeah.
First off, the article was kind of a straw man anyway, because no one is suggesting that you publish 4 books a year. People who do write 4 books a year are typically writing them on, and there are people who do that, but they're typically writing them on contract to other publishers underneath other people's names.
Correct.
That is, you know, if you look at, I'll take Robotech as an example. They had 18 Robotech paperback novels back in the 1980s and 90s, and they were all under one name, but that wasn't the real name. It was just the name of a name that the publisher came up with, and the 18 novels were written by 8 or 9 or 10 different people. And so as a writer, you'd go to them and they would hire you out to do work for hire. You're not even getting a traditional rate as far as royalties or thing like that.
Right.
You're given a flat fee, hired out as a work for hire. You write the book they want you to do and move on, and your way to make money in that, because any one novel is not going to pay you that much, and you're never going to become one of those big hits. Your way to make money at that is to write 4 of them a year.
Right.
And they're
romance.
Yeah.
Romance as well. But yeah, go ahead.
And so the thrust of the article is it's a straw man. It's not real. Nobody's telling people who are writing books to self-publish or indie publish, hey, go out and write 4 books a year because that's how you become a bajillionaire. What they're saying is exactly this. Taking 10 years to write the great American novel with the belief that you're going to end up with the next To Kill a Mockingbird or the next Peyton Place or whatever your whiny anti-bourgeois America and the middle class sucks novel is going to be entitled. Whatever you think you're going to be writing, the fact is you're not going to be commercially successful. And I'm talking in terms of having a job, of being able to make a living at being a writer. You're not going to be commercially successful writing one single whiny bullshit I hate everything in the world novel a decade. Okay? That's not the way to succeed. Now, if you don't care how much money you make, if your only point in writing a novel is so you can parade around parties and lean up against the bar and say to a woman there, hey, baby, I'm a writer. If you want to try to win some literary awards, if in other words, writing is not something you want to do as a vocation, but something you want to do to flatter your ego, then by all means, take 10 years to write one mediocre, boring, preachy novel. That is certainly a path that is open to you. And if you are the right sex, if you're the right race, if you're the right sexual orientation, maybe you can even get some space in literary journals to review it. And if you are also talented and it accidentally happens to be a book people can stand to read, you might even show up in a book club. However, if what you want to do for a living is to be an actual author, to write, what you need to do is to practice writing, write the best book you can, get it out there, and then go on and write the next book. Whether that's 1 book a year, whether that's 2 books a year, whether that's 3 books a year, but I think you're going to be pushing it if you rush 3 books out. You just need to write, because that's how you get better at writing. All of these online, and you can find lots of them, and they're very informative. I don't want to put them down. All these podcasts, all of these online lessons, all of the books, 20 awesome kick-ass plots your readers will die to read and how to write them. all of these things are fine and dandy and can help you to a certain point. But past that point, it's just a matter of typing, just a matter of writing, just a matter of creating, just a matter of working your ass off to improve your craft. Get feedback, be okay with writing crap, and practice, practice, practice. Because if you don't practice, if you don't write, if you don't produce, one, you're not getting any better, and two, you never get paid. If you're not getting paid for what you write, you are not a real writer yet. If you've ever seen The Producers, that's exactly the same thing. Do you have a play that's open on Broadway? No. Do you have a play that's closed on Broadway? No. So you're not a producer yet. As soon as you have that play that opens on Broadway and then closes on Broadway, then you're a Broadway producer.
Yeah, as Aristotle said, you're defined by what you do. And unfortunately, writing seems to have more than its share of people who claim to be authors. When you ask them, okay, what have you written? They're like, well, nothing, but I've got a lot of great ideas. But like you said, until you put at least one of them on paper, you ain't a writer. So on that note, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in like the 5 minutes we have left.
We'll skip it. We'll do it another week.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We don't have 5 minutes. I can't even explain what irritates me about the show in 5 minutes. It's not so much irritates, what bores me to tears about the show. I can't even explain what bores me to tears about the show in 5 minutes. So we'll make this one all about, editing and writing and indie publishing and stuff.
Okay. Might want to change the title after the fact, just FYI, but
yeah,
it's up to you.
I actually started to change it already.
Well, good.
Because I'm that far ahead of the curve.
Amazing. Well, while you're doing that then, back on the subject of Larry's Fisk and writing, yeah, totally proving your contention that the original HuffPo article is a straw man. Yes, looking at these figures, the average self-published author making in the 6-figure range is writing 2 or 3 books a year, not 4.
Well, Larry says this too, and so does Sarah A. Hoyt. Sarah Hoyt, who is also an indie published author, as well as a traditionally published author, they say this. Let's say you have a series of books, and there's 4 books, and you're selling them each for $5 on Amazon. If what you want as a writer is to get big checks so you can pay your rent, you need to have people not just buying the hot new work you release, you need to have them buying your backlist.
Right.
That's what your backlist is for. It makes you money while you do other things. You've already put in all the work. The work's over and done with. And it's just sitting there kind of earning money. If you're an indie author, though, your backlist is contingent on you releasing a new book in your series. So if you have a series of 5 books at $5 a pop, and you release a 6th one, then everybody who's been reading the series, or hopefully lots of people who've been reading the series, will buy your 6th one, and people who have never picked up your series before will hear it's being released, buy the 6th one, and then go back and buy the previous 5. As an indie author, that's how you make your most money, and it's not that different from a traditionally published author either.
No, exactly. I mean, that's why I've got a book out now. I'm currently editing book 2, and I've already started the outline for book 3, so... like Larry said, when you finish one book, it's your job as a writer to start the next one.
It's a lot of work. People just underestimate exactly how much effort and work go into making a novel. It is not easy.
Oh, good Lord. I actually finally had it happen to me, the old cliche. Someone approached me and said, hey, I've got a great idea for a novel.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That happened to you yet? It will.
No, but I did have somebody tell me when I announced I was writing a memoir, they said, no, I don't want you to write a memoir. I want you to write a science fiction fantasy book.
Okay.
I'm like, well, I have heard your request, and I will do my best to produce a science fiction fantasy book after I finish my memoir.
Have you ever heard Larry's response when people ask him that? Like make him that offer. Like I'll give you
yes.
this idea and we split it. Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know that the audience has, but
Okay. I don't know if you wanted to take the chance over, but yeah, he's like, "Well, tell you what, I'll give you 10 ideas that I don't have time to use for books, and then you go write all 10 books and go ahead and keep all the money." Because it's not about the ideas. I mean, it's raining soup out there. Go out, run outside with a bowl. Don't bring a strainer.
I have a whole nother rant about ideas. I put this into the memoir because it's actually topical about the subject I'm about. If you as a person get 50 ideas for something, about something, big or small, about 30 of them are going to be bad. They're going to be terrible, stupid, rotten, miserable, nasty ideas that you should never use. You should throw them right in the trash. About 15 of them are going to be serviceable. That is, they're not brilliant. They won't, shake the world, but they'll do. You can put that in parts of your novel that aren't the key critical parts of your novel, and they'll carry up. They'll hold up the rest of the novel. If you do happen to come up with something better later, fine, you can do something better. If you don't, serviceable ideas are fine. About 5 ideas are going to be great. They're going to be awesome ideas you're excited to use, and you should definitely put as many of those in the novel as possible. And just one of those 50 ideas, if you're lucky, will be so perfect and beautiful and right that you can use it in a key portion of your novel to make everything else look better. The key to quality is to generate lots of ideas, to ruthlessly prune the bad, use the serviceable until you can come up with something better. And if you don't, it's fine because it's a serviceable idea. It's the nuts and bolts underpinning of something. And to make the great ideas stretch as far as you can. And then to treasure and protect, preserve the perfect and pure ideas so that your work will rise above the common man. And to go against the advice I was giving earlier about writing, yes, sometimes it just takes time. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't write books. What that means is you should spend, and this is advice from novelist Orson Scott Card, he spends 4 to 5 years thinking about a book, thinking about what he wants to be in a book, picking it up every month or so if he gets an idea, or 2 months or 6 months, fiddling around with it, world building or characters or whatever, improving it, adding new ideas, throwing away the bad, and then puts it in the background, lets it sit on the back burner, and goes on and does something else. You need to let ideas cook. But the important thing is, while you are letting a novel cook, while you are letting your mind ruminate over what goes into it and what doesn't, while you're waiting to have 2 ideas that come completely separately that you can fit together into something great, you write. You keep on writing, and you keep on getting better at writing, so that when it becomes time for that novel to have matured, to have cooked, to where it's ready to be written, you can write it with the best talent and skill you have at your beck and call. Any last words, Brian, before we go?
I'm just going to say, after that beautifully instructive statement you just made, aspiring writers out there, listen to Daddy Warpig, do exactly what he just said. He's right. I'm living proof it's right, because I've done it. He's right. All
right. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We're sorry we didn't get to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Hopefully we'll be able to get to it next week or the week after that, depending on things. So this is Geek Gab with your hosts, Brian Niemeier and me, Daddy Warpig. Check us out on Twitter. And definitely check out Brian's book. There is a link in the description of the video. We appreciate everyone who tuned in. And fair warning, just so you know, just so you can be prepared, we will be back.